Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I am Dr. Alexander Riegel, the developmental minister here at First Church, and I want to extend a warm welcome this morning to our visitors, both here and watching from home online. We're very happy to have you with us today. First Unitarian Church is a place where you are free to be you. No matter your race, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your socioeconomic status, your age, or what have you. So bring your questioning mind and your expansive heart. Bring your entire self to this beloved community. Our mission at First Church is to welcome all with love, to support learning and spiritual growth, to serve our wider community, and to work for justice, equity, and inclusion. If you're visiting with us today, we especially welcome you. Please feel free to join us for our first Sunday of the month potluck following the service. Don't worry if you didn't bring a dish to pass, plenty to go around. That potluck will take place in Ellen Hall right after the service. Ellen Hall is basically from the entrance to the church, straight ahead and just a little jog to the left. Just follow the smell of coffee and you will find Ellen Hall. We'd love to have a chance to get to know you better and also to tell you a bit about this beloved community. Our flowers today are donated by Ann Turner, Fran Turner's daughter, in honor of Fran's birthday, which is, I put November 10th down here, but I think it's the 9th, but it's 10th. It is the 10th, all right, November 10th, a week from Monday. So you'll notice in the order of service a series of announcements. I want to particularly draw your attention to the announcement about the search committee that's in there. So the work that the search committee is doing on behalf of this congregation is very important. They're going to be holding an input session a week from today in room 207, which is upstairs to the end of the hallway, the newly revised room 207. And they're going to be asking for your feedback about what qualities do you most want to see in your next minister. They'd love to have as many people attend as possible. We can put 36 people in that room. And so if you can make it after the service next week, it would be very important for you to show up and give some feedback. But I want to emphasize that during this search process, through basically the middle of March, please do pay attention to whatever announcements come to your email box. I know that it's pretty easy. We can get sort of overwhelmed with email from church, but sometimes important communications happen, and the search committee will be using the announcement listserv as one of the ways to communicate with you about their work. All right, Gary and Kara, would you please come forward and share with us about the Heart and Hand auction? The amount of work that goes into pulling off a church auction is a lot. And so I want to give them a hand now, knowing they're going to knock it out of the park.
Kara, I'm so excited about the Heart and Hand auction that starts this month. In fact, the online auction starts Friday, this Friday. I really wish I could see everything that's available so I could develop my buying plan.
Dad, thanks to the phenomenal Allison Irwin, you can see everything that is available right now in 32 auctions.
Really? How?
It is so easy. Even you can do it.
Hey!
Sorry, Dad. Visit 32auctions.com, Heart and Hand 25. We've also sent you an email with that link. Log in or create an account. Everyone will need to create an account to bid at any of our auctions. You can't bid on anything yet, but you can see everything that will be offered.
So I can see the Roars family Mongolian hot pot dinner?
Yes, and Nancy's tickets for Cincinnati Pops, Peter and the Wolf.
And Molly and Alan's Chalice Christmas ornaments, and his 5 hours of auto cleaning and detailing.
And piano lessons.
So I can learn to play the piano lessons as well as Marie?
Well, Dad.
Okay. We also have Chris, Rosie, Amy, and Brandon's Rockin' in the Suburbs.
How about Lou's handmade Bernie Sanders mittens?
We just saw those. And Ray's morning service of newspaper, beverage, and pastries.
How about Dennis's Collections 21 tour of antique cars?
And Chris and Rosie's 7-day getaway in Athens, Georgia, not Ohio.
And so many more. Just check out 32 Auctions and our wall.
Wait a minute. How about that book, Caddy and the Cursed Oak by Kara Ewell?
Please excuse my dad. This is embarrassing.
This is my daughter.
And remember, there will be beer and wine available with cash donations, so bring cash.
And don't forget to buy your restaurant raffle tickets for great dinner options, along with First Church's famous Heads and Tails game at the live auction.
We are looking forward to seeing everyone at the Heart and Hand auction at First Church. Our online auction starts November 7th at noon and ends November 13th. Those items are not part of the silent and live auctions. The silent auction, followed by the live auction, includes all new items and starts at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, November 15th. We can't wait.
And check out the bulletin board out here, the art wall. It's great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so before we begin the rest of our service, let's take some time to wave to the people watching online on YouTube. And let's take some time to greet our friends and neighbors. And when you hear the sound of the singing bowl, please return to your seats. I thought that one was going to take a while. You've been a lively crowd this morning. I could tell before church began. It must be the potluck preparation, right? Barbara Bonnie, would you come forward and light our chalice for us? We're lighting our chalice this morning to the words of Bill Schulz. Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart. All right, AJ, would you please come forward and share your narrative about Share the Plate? And if the ushers would, we're going to take up the offering during the musical reflection today, so just be prepared for that. Come on up, AJ.
Good morning, my name is AJ Lewis, and I'm the First Church Liaison for the UUSC. We're going to watch a quick video about this year's guest at your table.
Universalists have been coming together for decades to support human rights through the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's Guest at Your Table program. During this special program, UUs of all ages learn more about important issues and the groups, or partner organizations, UUSC works together with to advance human rights. Working with community-based groups like UUSC Partners is a great way to get help directly to folks after disasters like a hurricane, and helps make sure the needs that are most important to communities are being met. UUSC works with more than 50 partner organizations around the globe, together responding to humanitarian crises, gender-based violence, persecution of activists, climate change, and more. Guest at Your Table is a chance to get to know our partners and these issues better through learning the stories of 4 people connected to UUSC partners as if we were sharing a meal together. They are the guests in Guest at Your Table. After getting to know the guests, UUs spread the word about human rights and raise much-needed funds for UUSC partners. From supporting youth leadership trainings, to amplifying their voices to world leaders, to buying needed supplies after a natural disaster, our partners request our help with all sorts of projects that make a difference in their communities. Through Guest at Your Table, Unitarian Universalists form a mighty web that helps support UUSC partners in their important work. Thank you for helping keep this important tradition going strong and joining us in the Guest at Your Table program.
Growing up Christian Protestant, going on mission trips was almost a rite of passage, and traveling somewhere to help the local people was considered an important part of living out your Christian faith. And if you couldn't go as a missionary yourself, you would give money to those who could. As a Unitarian Universalist, I've come to see that the same impulse to serve, to connect, to make a difference is reflected in the work of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, or the UUSC. In many ways, the UUSC is our missionary organization. But unlike the missionary model that I grew up with, UUSC doesn't bring the change to those communities, it partners with them. It supports community-led efforts for climate change, democracy, civil liberties, and provides crisis response. In this year's Guest at Our Table program, we're invited to meet 4 different grassroots partners, organizations doing courageous work around the world. And today I just want to share one of them, which is a group in Haiti, who was again hit by another hurricane just this week. For more than 30 years, the GGAR has been a lifeline for Haitian migrants deported from the Dominican Republic. These are families who fled poverty, violence, and instability in search of safety, only to be sent back across the border, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. At their center in Haiti, the GARR provides immediate care, shelter, food, sanitation kits, and safe transportation back home. But their work goes deeper than meeting basic needs. They help families reconnect, offer trauma counseling, and fight for justice in the face of discrimination and abuse. The GARR also works on a national scale, holding government accountable. They helped win a landmark human rights case against the Dominican military for violence against Haitian migrants. With UUSC support, the GARR assisted over 16,000 migrants in 2024 alone, the year which the UN called one of Haiti's deadliest years ever. Through the UUSC and guests at your table, we are part of that mission. When you leave here today, I'll be outside, and I want you to take one box per family and a little booklet which will tell you all about the 4 partnerships, organizations that we're working with this year. Keep it in a visible place like the middle of your table as a daily reminder of the work that the UUSC does and its partners to defend human rights and dignity. You can put coins, cash bills, or little notes of hope every single day as a family. I'll be available after the service, and thank you for supporting the work that we do. Thank you for expanding the welcome table for all.
Our first hymn this morning is number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me in the Gray Hymnal. Please turn to it and rise as you are able. And now a word from our sponsor. There's a light blue Toyota hybrid with its lights on, license plate HSX6154. So this morning is a sermon that I'm doing as a result of some conversations I've had recently following one of my sermons. And again, uncharacteristic of me, I wrote this baby out. But I've said before, on occasion I do write out sermons if I'm going to preach about something particularly sensitive so that I don't get misquoted after the fact. Or if I'm doing a sermon and I think people might want take-home material from the sermon, this might be one of those sermons for you, especially if you take your spiritual journey seriously. So if after the sermon today you want a copy of the reading and or the sermon itself, I can send that to you. The reading this morning is from one of my own blog posts that I did these many moons ago before I got knocked offline with COVID and life demands. I haven't blogged in quite a while, but I was putting together the sermon this week, and I thought, I think that blog post would make a great introductory reading. But since it's a blog post, it's about 5 minutes long, so take a breath. It's called Legacy of Lies, ? Carl Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." In my work as a spiritual director, I have noticed over time that my clients almost universally encounter certain predictable impediments on the spiritual path. One such impediment is called ego death, the realization that eventually dawns upon one that in order truly to make progress on the path, one must give up who one is in order to become who one is yet to be. Even though people may profess to want personal transformation, once they realize the cost, their egoic identity, they decide that the devil they know is better than the angel they don't know. Convincing self-deceptive rationalizations for abandoning the journey usually follow. Another such impediment is when people realize, usually unconsciously, that they don't have a very deep conviction about the why and wherefore of their spiritual journey. Back in the day, read somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, the why and wherefore of the spiritual journey was very clear: to achieve direct subjective experience of one's essential or spiritual self. The Katha Upanishad puts it like this: "The self-existent Lord pierced the senses to turn outward. Thus we look to the world outside and see not the self within. A sage withdrew his senses from the world of change, and, seeking immortality, looked within and beheld the deathless self." Nowadays, motivations vary quite a bit. Idle curiosity, self-development, spiritual journey is the in thing these days, so I guess I'll do it. The problem with these motivations is that, though laudable, what fuels them, namely mental determination and self-will, have very little staying power. Because of this, people's study and practice rarely delivers the goods, and as is the case with ego death, they soon find convincing self-deceptive rationalizations for abandoning their journey. When I encounter a client whose motivation proves insufficient to the task, the greatest indicator is that her journey is one of lengthy fits and starts. I prompt her to reconsider her motivation. To cut to the chase, I eventually find the opportunity to relate the above passage from the Katha Upanishad. And then I ask, "So, what is your version of you? Do you believe that there is within you a deathless self, an essential self, a spiritual self that you can discover? Or do you believe that the Katha Upanishad is part of a legacy of lies?" Very few people have a ready answer for this question because very few people have actually thought it through. Remember, motivations for the spiritual journey are quite varied, most of which don't prompt this particular question. When encouraged to think about it, though, most people remain ambiguous about it. And I attribute their ambiguity to the fact that we now live in a predominantly scientific and psychological age. Two disciplines that have cast serious shadow over the traditional notion of the self, i.e., that we have an essential self, apart from the egoic self. Given this, I invite you to consider the following. In our modern world, we are quick to psychologize away that against which we are biased. No offense intended to my psychological friends. A very similar point could be made regarding my scientific friends. But so ubiquitous has become the tendency to psychologize away mystical experience that when it comes to spiritual matters, many psychologists today, and much of the population at large, are like the man holding the hammer to whom everything looks like a nail. Rejoinder: sometimes a mystical experience is just a mystical experience. Granted that people often mistake egoic experience as mystical, we should nevertheless be very hesitant to sweep the Upanishads and other mystical texts, Buddhist, Christian, Sufi, what have you, under the psychological rug. These texts do not represent a legacy of lies. Rather, they represent universal truth claims that result from deep meditative states achieved by lifelong practitioners of refined consciousness within every one of the world's major religious traditions. So having stated that, let me return to the crux of this post. If you are someone who has had a difficult time sustaining a spiritual practice, I invite you to reconsider your motivation, for it is likely that the difficulty stems from a motivation that is insufficient to the task. Obviously, from what I've already written, the belief that one has an essential self that one can discover is from whence proper and sufficient motive arises. At least this is this mystic's opinion. So I ask, what is your version of you? In the meantime, I hear tell of a story about a merchant who once sold everything he owned to purchase a pearl of great price. On which more, see my next post. Namaste. So during our musical reflection, we're going to ask the ushers to come forward and take up the offering for Share the Plate. As always, I encourage you to be as generous as you are able for this good cause. So when I arrived at First Unitarian Church, I did a sermon series on racial justice, which I grounded in our scientific understanding of human nature. That is, I spoke about how our instinctual nature is largely responsible for the racial injustice we see throughout the world, especially our tribal instinct. Not long after that sermon series, I did another sermon, or two, or three, if you may remember, in which I spoke about how the spiritual life runs counter to human nature, counter to our instinctual life. For instance, my sermon entitled, Jesus Fierce Love, if you want to go back and view that one. Today I'm going to revisit the themes of human nature and the spiritual life in response to some conversations that ensued following my sermon of a few weeks ago, God's Rant to Job. The primary theme in those conversations was why I have such unshakable confidence in my spiritual knowledge. As I said in that sermon, my confidence stems from the experiences I have had in my spiritual practice over the years. Experiences that map well onto some of the mystics' reports, like Teresa of Avila, the Hindu yogis, and Rumi. What follows then is an explanation of how anyone who takes spiritual practice seriously over the course of a lifetime can make their own discoveries and draw their own conclusions about the truth claims of the world's great contemplatives. Indeed, I believe that by the end of this sermon, you will come to understand that these contemplatives did not bequeath to us a legacy of lies, but subjective reports about the truth of who we are as human beings and about the nature of reality. Then it will be up to you to decide whether you wish to commit your time and effort to this endeavor, in order that you yourself can know the truth of these claims in your own undeniable subjective experience. We need to begin with a succinct and coherent presentation regarding the material that I have sporadically shared with you these last couple of years about our human nature. More specifically, how we function as egoic selves in the world. So we're going to take a few minutes and look at the screen behind the pulpit, if we could have our first slide. And I'm going to put you through about 5 minutes of a biology lesson. Even though we as biological organisms are an organic unity, to understand how we function, it's helpful to think categorically. So here then are the 5 categories we need to understand. Genetics contains the information according to which the biological self is constructed. Neurology, the information highway by which information from the world or environment is obtained and by which it is delivered to the brain for processing. Instincts. The fundamental instinct is the survival instinct in service of gene replication. And the survival instinct requires the success of a subset of instincts: the sexual instinct, the instinct for self-preservation, and the tribal instinct, that is, the need to belong to the group. Emotions, the barometer that informs whether the instinctual agenda is succeeding in different environments or situations. And the mind, the mechanism that processes incoming information to create a map of reality and calculate how successfully to maneuver within that reality to satisfy the instinctual agenda. So now let's consider how these categories work together. That is, how we function. I think you can take the slide down at this point. So how do we function as egoic selves in the world given this information? Now trust me, this brief biological lesson is indispensable in understanding the spiritual agenda. So if you're not scientifically inclined, hang with me for another few minutes and then we'll move on. Genetics determines the unfolding of the other categories of the self in service of the survival instinct, i.e., the gene's agenda of self-replication. In other words, our neurology, our instincts, our emotions, and yes, even our mind really all work toward the end of reproduction, our fundamental instinctual drive. And as we move through the world, we seek to satisfy the subset of instincts that are required for the survival instinct to succeed. We must be accepted by our tribe, which allows us to gather what we need for our security. That's the self-preservation instinctual subset, which makes us ultimately, hopefully, attractive to a mate. And that is the sexual drive within us. I think of emotions as barometers that inform us of the success or failure of our instinctual efforts. I'm going to repeat that because until I took on this study during my sabbatical about 5 or 6 years ago, I never thought of emotions this way. But when I was doing my study, it dawned on me, this is what emotions really are. They are barometers that inform us of the success or failure of our instinctual efforts. Every emotion you have, I guarantee you, can ultimately be traced back to one or more of these instinctual drives. Positive emotions signal instinctual success. Negative emotions signal instinctual failure. And it's the mind's role to calculate strategies or make course corrections in response to our emotional barometer. And finally, and most importantly for our purpose this morning, so if that's too much to remember, don't worry, you don't need to. Take this away from the last 5 minutes. It is the role of our neurology to gather information from the environment, as I've said, in order for the mind to map the environment, calculate our actions in the environment in service of our instinctual drives, and make adjustments when necessary, again in service of our instinctual drives. So this is the important takeaway of the last 5 minutes relative to the spiritual agenda. The egoic self functions in relation to its environment all of the time. The egoic self functions in relationship to its environment all of the time in service of gene replication. Simply stated, the egoic self is designed to know the world. Now that may seem really obvious to you, but when you hear what comes next, and here we're getting on with the spiritual part of today's sermon, I think a light bulb of at least deeper understanding of the significance of how the egoic self functions will go off. In other words, we're going to shift our attention now from how we know the world to how we come to know that which knows the world. In other words, how do we come to know the knower? That essential self or that spiritual self, which you'll notice I didn't mention in the biological description of the egoic self. The Kena Upanishad talks about the knower like this: that which makes the mind think, but cannot be thought by the mind. that which makes the mind think, but cannot be thought by the mind, that is the self. That which makes the eye see, but cannot be seen by the eye, that is the self. That which makes the ear hear, but cannot be heard by the ear, that is the self. That which makes the tongue speak, but cannot be spoken by the tongue, that is the self. That which makes you draw breath, but cannot be drawn by your breath, that is the self. Coming to know that self is what the remainder of this sermon is about. Throughout the course of my spiritual journey, I have been blessed with a number of very wise teachers. And from time to time, I've hooked parts of my sermons on pieces of wisdom they've handed me. By now, somewhere along our journey together, these 2+ years, you've probably heard me invoke Helen Palmer's phrase, energy follows attention. Or a phrase by Ram Dass, you have to become somebody before you can become nobody. Today, I'm hooking this part of my sermon on a piece of wisdom from Robin Amos. Robin is a teacher I knew only briefly before he passed, but whose doorway into the world of Mount Athos introduced me to a treasure trove of mystical wisdom. And Mount Athos is actually a peninsula, I think in northern Greece, where the monks preserve that ancient spiritual wisdom that stretches all the way back to the 2nd and 3rd century in Alexandria, Egypt. Robin once said, "The spiritual journey is counter to egoic tendency." In other words, we come to know the knower by restraining the operations of the egoic self. We come to know the knower by restraining the operations of the egoic self. This is why a thorough study of the self is vital to all spiritual endeavors. The egoic self is the singular impediment to spiritual realization. We must know the self. To understand what I mean when I say that we come to know the knower by restraining the operations of the egoic self, let me toss a little more mystical literature at you. This was in the reading I just did a few moments ago from the Katha Upanishad. The self-existent Lord pierced the senses to turn outward. Thus we look to the world without and see not the self within. A sage withdrew his senses from the world of change, and looking within, beheld the deathless self. When the Katha Upanishad says, the self-existent Lord pierced the senses to turn outward, thus we look to the world without and see not the self within, it is talking about the very operations of the egoic self I discussed just a bit ago. It is talking about the fact that the egoic self is designed to know the world. But when the Upanishad continues, a sage withdrew his senses from the world of change and looking within beheld the deathless self. It is giving us instructions on how to restrain the operations of the egoic self in order to come to know the knower, to come to know your essential nature, to come to know your spiritual self. So in Sanskrit, the process of withdrawing one's senses from the world is known as pratyahara. And if we could have that next slide, that would be wonderful. This is my friend the tortoise, whom I often use as a background on my Zoom sessions, and whenever I do, people say to me, of all things, why that big tortoise? Well, here's why. The term pratyahara is derived from two other Sanskrit terms, prati and ahara. The term prati means away, and the term ahara means food. Put together, what pratyahara means is literally to turn away from food, to abstain. At this point, it's worth mentioning another nugget of spiritual wisdom you might have recalled hearing me say over the last couple of years. Impressions are food for the psyche. Impressions are food for the psyche. In this very moment, your neurology is gathering information about the world. It's taking in the impression of this moment and delivering it to the psyche. We can thank Gurdjieff for that one, and it's a nice summation of the operations of the egoic self we've been discussing. So keeping this in mind, we can understand pratyahara like this. It's the prevention of impressions from entering the psyche. The prevention of impressions from entering the psyche, which is accomplished by withdrawing one's senses from the world. Very simple instructions. The Bhagavad Gita describes pratyahara by use of a metaphor. It says the Gita, one who is able to withdraw the senses from their objects, just as a tortoise withdraws its limbs into its shell, becomes established in divine wisdom. It's as simple as that, folks. One who is able to withdraw the senses from their objects, just as a tortoise withdraws its limbs from its shell, becomes established in divine wisdom. So recalling that our neurological system takes in information from the world, delivers that information to the brain, so the mind may produce a map of reality in service of the instincts. What might happen if we actually withdrew the senses from the world? If we were to provide no information from our neurological system to deliver to the brain so the mind may produce a map of reality, what then? Without a map of reality to read, consciousness would have no object to observe but itself. It is under these conditions that we come to know the knower. The Yoga Sutras state the matter like this. At the time of concentration, consciousness, the essential self, rests in its own nature. That singular sentence is the goal of all yogic effort. To come to see your consciousness, your essential nature, rest in its own nature. This is what it means to know the knower. This is what realization is. This is the spiritual gold of the spiritual life. Though expressed somewhat differently across the mystical traditions due to cultural differences and the trappings of abstract theological language, every mystical tradition shares this singular agenda of exploring consciousness, every single one of them, of knowing the knower, of discovering one's essential nature. Further, every spiritual tradition has developed some set of spiritual practices for the practice of pratyahara, though not every spiritual practice has this aim as its goal. So the instructions are easy. It's the application that's difficult. As I've said, the spiritual journey is counter to our egoic tendencies. That is, these spiritual practices are designed to restrain the operations of the egoic self. That's the struggle on the spiritual path. And that egoic self is a fierce mechanism that has survival and replication, not realization as its goal. The Sufi Sheikh Kabir Helminski articulates this as well as anybody when he says this, and those of you who studied his book Living Presence with me might find this passage familiar. Kabir writes, "The essential self is such a fine and subtle energy that it can be obscured by the coarser energies of our existence. The energies of thought, desire, instinct, and sensation. These are the veils over the essential self, the substances of intoxication that numb us out to the awareness that we even have an essential self." He goes on, "Our real self, our hidden treasure, is beyond our awareness and our personality, but we can find a channel to it. This channel is created through the presence of finer energies in us, and these energies are the result of a certain work. The certain work of which Kabir speaks are the sets of spiritual practices the different mystical traditions have developed and bequeathed to us. What they've bequeathed to us is no secret. It's easy to find if you spend some of your Sunday afternoons picking up mystical texts. So here then finally is the rub of this sermon. I know it's been a lot to contain, but remember, this one's written out if you want to read it, and it's also, again, on YouTube for viewing again. So here's the rub of this point of this sermon. Within the structure of the egoic self, along with the mind, the emotions, and the body, is a fourth aspect that is our essential self, our spiritual self, the soul in traditional language. And through consistent, long-term, sincere application of certain spiritual practices, this essential self can be experientially known. Though such experience is not easy to attain. So hence we read again in the Katha Upanishad, you've probably heard this, the path is sharp like a razor's edge. The path is sharp like a razor's edge, difficult to traverse. Though difficult, I would suggest that the spiritual journey, the effort to apply spiritual practice with the aim of experientially knowing the essential self, is life's most worthy endeavor. It's life's most worthy endeavor because the essential self is the source of the spiritual qualities most everyone professes they wish to possess. That spiritual self is the source of the spiritual qualities most everyone professes they wish to possess. Patience, empathy, compassion, the ability to forgive, and most of all, unconditional love. So finally, the sermon is begging a question I'd be remiss not to answer before we conclude, and we're getting close to the conclusion. Namely, if the path is sharp like a razor's edge, difficult to traverse, why would one commit such time and effort toward a spiritual journey? Well, my answer to this is that one does not have to reach the end goal of realizing one's essential self in order for the spiritual journey to bear fruit. As Krishna said to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, "On this path, O Arjuna, no effort is ever wasted." As soon as one applies spiritual practice to the ego, transformation begins. Though imperceptible at first, Over the course of a lifetime, the accumulation of spiritual effort increasingly gives rise to a personal presence that exhibits the spiritual qualities we seek. Again, patience, empathy, compassion, the ability to forgive, unconditional love. So toward the end of beginning the journey, here's a little bit of advice. Practice pratyahara piece by piece, a little bit at a time. Such practice begins by paying attention to your attention. Simply notice from time to time what has caught your attention. It will almost certainly be some object of attention onto which your five senses have latched in service of your instinctual life. Then ask yourself this question: how imperative is it that I attend to this object at this moment? If it's not imperative, which it likely will not be 90% of the time, shift your attention from that object to your breath. Keep your attention within you for a while. It's okay to let the world go its merry way without you for a moment or two. By doing this bit by bit, you will begin to experience greater moments of inner freedom and spaciousness. And it's in that freedom and spaciousness that your essential self will slowly make itself known to you. And when that begins to happen, seek out quietude and stillness in order to cultivate the experience more deeply. And don't worry about what happens next. Seek out quietude and stillness for yourself. So along these lines, I'm going to end here with a little Mary Oliver. In her book, 1,000 Mornings, Mary Oliver writes this: "Today I'm flying low and not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. The world goes on as it must. The bees in the garden rumbling, the fish leaping, the gnats getting eaten, and so forth. But I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. I hardly move, though really I'm traveling a terrific distance. Ponder this: stillness. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple." Thank you for sitting with me through that. If you'd like a copy, let me know. You can watch it on YouTube. But in the meantime, we're going to sing hymn number 20 in the spirit of Sister Carol, and then head to our potluck. Number 20 in the gray hymnal, "Be Thou My Vision." Please turn to it and rise as you are able. please be seated. Barbara Bonney, can you come forward and extinguish our chalice for us this morning? And we're going to extinguish the chalice with words from Mary Oliver's poem, Sometimes. Mary writes, "Here are some instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it." Blessed be. Namaste, everyone.